Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This will be episode 145, I believe, Ron, coming to you live on July 20th, 2026, with a lot to go over. There's a lot happening here in the United States that I want to cover. I don't want this to just be another Middle East war update or an Iran war update. So we're going to be covering a couple of stories, a lot of stories actually, centered around some of the latest things happening here. Zohran Mamdani hitting the news again with some outrage culture bait, and I kind of love it. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of love it. Threatening to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he steps foot in New York City. Going to talk about that. The Houthis, of course, the major news in the Middle East today. The Houthis have closed the Bab Al Mandeb Strait, as I predicted they would. This is an easy prediction, though. Anybody even halfway paying attention to Iran recognizes that this was always going to unfold this way, and Iran has been waiting for this moment to activate this trap card, I guess we'll call it, a real ace in their back pocket. And, of course, Marco Rubio now coming out and making some political moves, in my opinion, or at least revealing the political strategy that's unfolding internally in the Trump administration, as we now see Marco Rubio setting his eyes on Cuba. Even in the midst of all of this taking place, we literally have Marco Rubio right now talking about Cuba and basically implying on behalf of the Trump administration, as we've seen them freak out lately over the rise of Democratic Socialists in America. It is now our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's doubling down on the efforts in Cuba and using this new virtue signaling kind of campaign of pointing at Cuba and saying it is Cuba's fault that democratic socialism is rising in America. And it's a very interesting political strategy that I'm going to break down a little bit of, at least tonight, and perhaps even go into more tomorrow, because there is a lot to talk about tonight, and I'm not even really sure how much time I have to do this. So that's what's on the horizon here. Of course, gas is now soaring back up today, as the national average has once more toppled over the $4 per gallon national average amount, $4 a gallon for gas. It's occurred after it was announced that Iran's allied Yemeni Houthis have done what I forewarned, shut down the Strait of Hormuz, all while, of course, Iran is publicly taunting Trump and daring him to commit to a increased escalation, boots on the ground war in Iran. And they're specifically telling him, take Karg Island if you can. This is being done after it was announced as well recently that the Pentagon has in fact hid the casualty count from the public and admitted today that the number of casualties is closer to 100, with 17 of those being absolute fatalities. And all while back home in the United States, like I said, it's Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, scheduled to be visiting in September, is what it was. This is delayed. He was supposed to have already visited, if I remember correctly. It's been delayed to September, and that's where we're seeing Zohran Mamdani rise up here. And he's basically saying, I'm exploring New York law, he says, and U.S. law to determine whether or not he's legally allowed to place Netanyahu under arrest if he steps foot in New York City. He's directly quoted as stating, and I have the footage, we'll play it in a little bit, stating that Netanyahu deserves the Hague and is wanted in several countries for war crimes. It's one more example, truthfully, of democratic socialists being ahead of the curve on a lot of these topics that, in my opinion, topics like Israel are becoming a true zeitgeist for millennials and Gen Z, and it is the democratic socialists who are ahead of the curve, ahead of the Republicans on this topic, just like the Democrats have always historically found themselves when it comes to political messaging, ahead of Republicans. And it's no different right now, as the democratic socialists like Mamdani have figured this out, and they are leaning hard. They are leaning hard into it, in recognition that it is the zeitgeist of millennials, it's the zeitgeist for millennials and Gen Zers, and it's already won elections. We've seen that with Zohran Mamdani, the kingmaker of New York City, they called him, after he appointed, basically, through his own recommendations in the Democratic primaries, he appointed and handpicked 3 new Democratic Socialists in the New York City districts, as well as having his hand on the Colorado district as well, that we saw went to a Democratic Socialist. who was 28 years old and usurped a 30-year incumbent Democrat who literally had held that seat longer than the Democratic Socialists had been alive. So this is what's happening right now. I'll get into all of that. And like I said, I'm going to get into some political game being played out right now within the Trump administration, as well as I've mentioned in the past, the divide between Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance, what we're seeing when it comes to the internal fracture of MAGA as they fall apart and crumble while this Trump administration collapses under the own weight of its corruption, truthfully, and really collapses under its own weight of Israel worship at any cost. The religiously zealot, disgusting Trump administration that worships Israel and Zionist pigs at any cost, even at the cost of sacrificing its own integrity and success for the safety, well-being, and truthfully at the demand of Israel. And so we are seeing panic in the Trump administration right now, and the way that it's being handled by Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance has been very fascinating to watch. I've done basically almost full episodes on this in the past because it's very obvious which way each person is leaning, both being, of course, future possible GOP candidates. So Marco Rubio has found himself probably, in my opinion, politically in the best position possible right now. He's away from Iran with his eyes set on Cuba, and he's now stating, like I said, that it's actually Cuba who is to blame for the latest startling rise in popularity of democratic socialism in America. So he's targeting the commies, going after Cuba, and really has not much to do with Iran. It is brilliant maneuvering politically, at least on paper. If it wasn't as see-through, and the thing is, I don't think it's as see-through as I see through it. I think a lot of goy American scum, a lot of stupid MAGA cultists are going to completely fall for the whole, well, Marco's great and so is Vance, we win either way kind of deal. They're not really going to ever understand, I think. They're too low IQ and dumb to ever fully understand just how absurd of a choice it is to have to pick between Rubio or Vance. But Rubio, to his credit, he is politically maneuvering himself very efficiently, unlike J.D. Vance, who is being revealed to be a complete incompetent bum who can't get anything done, and every decision Vance makes just comes back to bite him more and more and makes him look worse and worse. So we're going to get into all of that and a little more for episode 145 of American Advocates. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it does help YouTube push this show out to more people who need to see this. Also, of course, subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. It's free to do, and it really does also help a lot, as you can turn on post notifications and then therefore be notified every single time I go live. We're going to start in the Middle East, like I said, the Houthis and everything unfolding there. We're going to get that out of the way before I get into the more fun topics about Zohran Mamdani, Benjamin Netanyahu's visit, and Marco Rubio's political maneuvering. So in the Middle East, to get this out of the way, basically, we got two big stories that I want to discuss centered around that, and that is the, of course, U.S.-Iran war, which is now on day 142, by the way. If you're a longtime viewer on this channel, you remember back in the day when I really first started going live, that was one of my openings. Day 142 of the Iran war. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Of course, actually, I can believe it, and I've been predicting from the start that this war would certainly not be a 12-day excursion like Trump was telling us it would be, nor would it have been the 3-week excursion that it was originally extended to by Trump and the administration at that time. And I also shot down the very silly and stupid idiotic notion by Trump and by the MAGA follower cultists at the time, too, who were calling me a panican, by the way, that it was going to only be 4 to 6 weeks, which was yet again another extension handed to us by Trump. And I love reminding everybody of that because I want people who bought into that to feel as fucking stupid as they are for ever having believed it. Yes, you are absolutely retarded if all the way back in March you sat in front of your TV with a drool down your left lip hanging out of your mouth as you ate your TV dinner, you fat-ass scum goy, and turned on Trump on Fox News saying, it's just 4 to 6 weeks. We said, they're a little tough, Iran, but we're cracking them, and, it's going to be over soon. They're totally annihilated. We're just finishing them off, and in 6 weeks, they're going to be nothing, and it's going to be unconditional surrender, really. There's going to be no other option for them. We demand unconditional surrender. 4 to 6 weeks, that's all, guys. Don't be a panicking. Don't be a panicking. I've got it all under control. We are in the golden age, and we will remain in the golden age, really. I mean, nobody's ever seen anything like it. So, 4 to 6 weeks, that's it. This is all going to be over. We had to do it for Israel. We had to do it, but it'll be over soon. 142 days. No end in sight. No end in sight. You think this is ending tomorrow? You think this is ending next week? You think Iran's going to surrender still? Embrace me as your leader and as your God, as Xerxes would say in the movie 300, because my God, my live stream era on this channel since January, when I started going live on this channel, after all last year posting videos, started going live, my live stream catalog at this point, specifically around the Middle East, just screams. It just screams accuracy, wisdom, knowledge. I am a prophet, and I've been almost completely correct on everything. As I've admitted in the past, when I have been wrong, I admit it. I tried to predict a strike on the one weekend I thought for sure we were going to bomb them on. I was wrong. But I wasn't completely wrong. I just was wrong on the time frame. We wound up bombing them about 6 weeks after the point where I predicted it. I knew we'd be back to bombing them after that stupid ceasefire, and we were. And the only other thing I've really been wrong on, egregiously so, would be the fact that I predicted boots on the ground being imminent. And I hate to say this because I actually loved the fact that I was wrong then. I predicted that, by the way, I think the second day of the war, or the seventh day of the war, perhaps, within the first week. Because strategically I war gamed it, and it's the only thing that makes sense, in all honesty, other than a peace deal being worked out, which was my other prediction that I was right on. And then I predicted that peace deal would fall apart, which it did. It's over with. The MOU is suspended officially, and really it's over. But boots on the ground was basically always going to be how this ends, and I'm just waiting at this point to be right about that. And I probably will be right about that, and it's going to be a sad day when I am, because I genuinely don't want to be right about that. I was happy when it looked like I was going to be potentially wrong. Boots on the ground is political poison for Trump. It will finish off his legacy. And when I predicted it at the time, I was still holding out a little bit of hope that maybe I could get back to supporting Trump in some way. That ship has sailed, obviously. I despise Trump. He's a complete traitor to MAGA and America, and I wish nothing but the worst for him and his family, his fucking Jewish family. I want them dismantled by the Democrats after the midterms this year. I want to see Trump impeached. But at the time, I was hoping, oh, well, Trump maybe, he'll be smart enough to not do boots on the ground. And then I still had to make the prediction, because when I went over the strategy and I war gamed it the best that I could, I realized that that was really the only way this was ever going to end, and it's increasingly looking more and more likely. Though, like I said, there's still a chance I'm wrong, and we pray on this channel that I am. So, 142 days of the war, no end in sight. I've been right about pretty much everything, and we are now seeing all of these reports being released. Like I said, like the Pentagon admitting, like I was also right about when I said this at the time. I literally said, by the way, you think they're being honest with you about the casualty count? You really think they're going to put that out there and make that public as bad as it is? Or do you think they're probably slow rolling the number? Because we had seen them do that in the other Middle East wars like Iraq and Afghanistan. They actually intentionally withhold that information from the American public to prevent a freakout. It would sound terrible if one day the news anchors had to report, oh, and by the way, last night there were about 100 casualties total from the bombing runs in Bahrain and in Jordan, with about 2 or 3 actual real actual fatalities. They don't want that to have to be reported that way, so they always intentionally withhold the information and wait till the last possible second to release it. And I was saying this the entire time on this channel when we were being fed this nonsense that, oh, Iran can't touch us, we've been destroying them, but we're invincible in the region, basically is what they wanted you to believe, and our soldiers are safe, etc. I was the one on this channel saying they're so full of shit, the casualty count is way higher, the fatalities are probably higher as well, and now the Pentagon, a senior administrative official, a senior official in the Pentagon admitted that in a story last night or this morning that, yes, they were intentionally hiding and underreporting Iran's the casualty count and the damage as a result of Iran's numerous different strikes that were carried out on our U.S. military bases in the Middle East. So I was right about that, and of course the world altering news that will have global implications here. I was right about this as well, referring to it as the ace in the back pocket for Iran, being the Houthis of Yemen, the Yemeni Houthis, and the Bab Al Mandeb Strait, which is of course on the other side of Saudi Arabia. They're dealing with this side now, and now this is the other side here, leads down from the Red Sea. And I said this, and I said Iran is playing strategically brilliant, mainly because in truth Iran is patient. Iran has been patient. They've been non-reactive, or not as reactive, certainly not as emotionally reactive as we've seen Trump be. For instance, every time Iran winds up doing something violent in the Middle East, it is always Trump who's chomping at the bit, quick to respond without really too much planning or strategy or thought. But it has been Iran that has been crafty and patient. They're like a serpent. I know they're the Persian tiger, but in many ways, they're like the wise, coiled serpent, always waiting to strike, but always waiting until the right time to strike as well. And I do give them a lot of objective strategical credit for that, because I was the one who said, they could have just responded totally scorched earth, but Iran has been waiting to be able to reveal a lot of this strategy or play these cards in order to respond properly and appropriately to Trump's increased escalation. So while many people were saying, the Houthis can't shut down the Bab Al Mandeb, or Iran would have done it already, I was the one saying, no, they're saving that. It's an ace in the hole. It's an ace in the back pocket that they can sneak onto the table when they know it's the right time to do so. And now here we are. They have shut down the Bab Al Mandeb Strait. So I was right again. I am like a prophet. I am intellectually superior to most of you goy scum down in chat, which is why right now you should recognize that and yield to me. You should like the stream. I am superior to you in every way. You should be pulling out your pen and paper and taking notes and learning from me, because you will never get information like this anywhere else. Like the stream too. Double tap your phone screens or hit the thumbs up button. That's free, and it supports this channel. It supports the truth that I have been putting out. It supports the truth that I have been utilizing to accurately make all of the predictions that I have on this channel, and you're not going to really hear it like this, certainly not being delivered like this on any other channel. So that's what's happening here. Now, the Houthis announcement has caused oil future markets, of course, to go into a slight panic, as we saw the national gas prices are now over $4 a gallon nationwide once again as a result of this news. And what we really saw were the oil futures markets responding to the twofold news of the Houthis shutting down the Bab Al Mandeb Strait, because that's going to be responsible for anywhere between an additional 8 to 12% of the world's global oil supply. And then additionally, the oil futures markets were responding to Trump's words himself, as he was basically saying on social media and to the mainstream media, that Iran would have to pay and suffer for the deaths of the 2 additional lost lives from the soldiers there. I saw it was a lieutenant, and then it was actually a woman. So there was a female soldier killed as well in those strikes in Jordan. And so the oil markets did not like that. And what we saw essentially was they jumped from about $78.46 all the way up at one point at their peak today at around, at their peak today, we saw them jump to close to $84. And that was crude oil, of course. Brent crude also jumped similarly by about $4 to $5. And it's not looking good. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that the Bab Al Mandeb Strait being closed down by the Houthis means that the global economy will once again be hit very hard again. Just like we saw the initial hit on the global economy back in March when the Iranians and the IRGC shut down the Strait of Hormuz, they are now using their allies, the Houthis, to shut down the Bab Al Mandeb Strait. And like I just said a minute ago, that's 8 to 12% more of the world's global oil trade being closed down essentially. Now, unlike with the Strait of Hormuz, and this is a little bit of a caveat here, The Strait of Hormuz doesn't really have like a major secondary exit route. So you kind of sail up into it, and Karg Island is the destination point because that's the point where 90% of Iran's oil exports are loaded onto the ships, and then the ships sail back down the Strait of Hormuz and into the Gulf of Oman, and then they basically exit the Persian Gulf. That's the main way the Strait of Hormuz works. It's sort of like there's a dead end, really. The Bab Al Mandeb obviously goes all the way up into the Red Sea and then sails down south out of the region of Saudi Arabia. So unlike with the Strait of Hormuz, when that's shut down, it's like it's just done. With the Bab Al Mandeb, you can kind of bypass the closure of the Bab Al Mandeb, and it will involve at that point sailing around Africa. And the problem with this is, while you can bypass it, so it's not as bad news, the problem is you are now increasing transport time, which means that the cost is still going to go up astronomically. You're adding, in many cases, weeks of extra travel time as a result of this, which means that fuel costs, transport costs, and for that matter, insurance costs with these insurance companies that have to insure these oil tankers and oil tankers and what's it called, cargo ships. These insurance companies have been playing a large part when it comes to the dilemma in all of this, and they're going to insist on more insurance and more expensive insurance because of the increased risk due to the increased transportation time. So that's what's going to have to happen now, and it is still going to be a massive dilemma now for the Trump administration to lead the way on when it comes to figuring out, since it was, of course, the U.S. and Trump that started this war that has now unfolded and descended into madness and chaos and global destruction, and that's just where we're at with that. Now, in addition to this, like I stated, Iran is also now taunting President Donald Trump and daring him to commit to even more escalation. And this is kind of a narrative shatterer for a lot of people here in the U.S. who will tune into Fox News and genuinely believe that it's basically any second now. If you believed, I'll put it to you this way: if you've believed the Fox News reporting on all of this, you are probably so shocked right now at how Iran managed to strike Jordan, kill two more U.S. soldiers, how they've managed to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut down still, including striking a Saudi Arabia tanker today to prove that they have control over the strait. You're probably shocked that Iran hasn't descended into an absolute civil war, because Fox has been feeding all of this crap. And actually, in some ways, even some of the liberal mainstream media has as well, since it's Israel that controls our media. The Zionist pigs control our media here, and they, of course, love this war. And so they're still putting the liberal spin on it when it comes to liberal mainstream media sources, and they're still using it to attack Trump as you would expect. But there's this subtle undertone of somewhat support universally in our mainstream media, and so they're all sort of guilty of feeding a lot of this propaganda to Americans of, oh, Iran is, they're fracturing politically. Of course, if you've been watching this channel, I shattered that myth the next day, and I've been right about that as well. And you believe, oh, Iran is totally annihilated, they have nothing left. I, of course, shattered that myth the next day as well on this channel, and I've been completely correct as well. So you're probably very shocked if you haven't been watching this channel, which is really the only channel you need to watch if you actually want to be informed correctly on geopolitics, specifically centered around the Middle East, where my focus has been, and really any other issue for that matter. I am right, they are wrong. I am almost always right, they are almost always wrong. I am smarter than most people, especially most people in chat. You are dumber than me. This is how it works. I was born this way. I can't help it. Now, what we have seen, by the way, Iran, like I said, they're daring Trump to commit to even more escalation. They're really daring him to commit to a ground invasion. They want Trump to put boots on the ground, and that's what shatters the narrative of them being decimated, because they're daring Trump. A nation that is truly decimated and is on the verge of surrender would not be publicly making these taunts towards the president of the U.S., but Iran is. And what we have seen now is this is the official, if I remember correctly, based off of February 28th and the first week of March, I think we have officially, as of today or yesterday, outdone ourselves when it comes to this being the now longest sustained bombing run campaign on Iran so far, as we have now cleared 9 full days of bombing Iran. We've been bombing them consistently since July 11th. And it's truly just Groundhog Day, which is what I've been comparing it to. It's the movie Groundhog Day, if you've ever seen it. It's a funny movie. But it is truly just Groundhog Day when it comes to Trump's plan for the Middle East and how all of this is unfolding in the Middle East, for that matter. We can bomb Iran all we want. It didn't work the first time. As I've explained many times in the past, it didn't work. And I don't know how much more evidence people need, because every time I say that, people will literally say in my chat, "You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean it didn't work?" It didn't work. They're still destroying oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, which by default means they still have escalation dominance and complete control of the strait. We already bombed the fuck out of them. I don't think people understand. We took out 14,000 total targets in Iran in that first week of March. We annihilated them. We killed like 5,000 Iranians. A good portion of them were, if you can call them innocent, I'm not sure, but a good portion of them were citizens, by the way, civilians. But a lot of military men, a lot of soldiers, a lot of politicians as well were caught in that and killed. We annihilated them, truly. Trump's term annihilation does fit when it comes to what we did to Iran back in February and March. And despite that, what do we have to show for it? Nothing. Iran has rebuilt. They still have control of the strait. Trump at one point basically surrendered to Iran with the Memorandum of Understanding, which reads as a surrender document of the U.S. surrendering to Iran. And we still can't solve this problem. We can't end this war, and Iran is not surrendering. So it didn't work. It's just objective fact. There's no arguing this. There's no in chat, well, but this, it didn't work then. It is not going to work now. And it is Groundhog Day. And it is, at this point, the definition of insanity, because it didn't work, and now Trump is trying the same thing and expecting a different result, which that's what insanity is. So that's where we're at here. And even during all of this, like I said, Iran again successfully struck that Saudi Arabian oil tanker, which is in the Strait of Hormuz. And it's just demonstrating that Iran is still standing. Again, a country destroyed wouldn't be able to generate that kind of force output, but Iran did. They disabled it, and they still have control over the strait. You know, all the while, like I pointed out on Fox News, I saw this clip from Marie Bartiromo, who, when she talks about the economy, strikes me as a decently smart woman, but you know, she's like shocked, and she's in awe and shocked right now at the report of two more U.S. soldiers dying in the Jordan base, the air base. She literally was on there saying, "I don't understand how Iran's doing this." She was genuine, and it was genuine. She was not saying it even condescendingly or sarcastically. She was genuinely on there, like, upset about the loss of our soldiers and saying, "I don't understand how Iran did this." Trump said we annihilated Iran. There's supposed to be nothing left. So it's like, what do you do about this? This is just propaganda being pushed onto America, and even the news reporters have bought into it. And people need to understand really what it means to have control and escalation dominance. So when I say Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz, control of that literally just means the ability to make a threat and carry out on it and deliver on the promise of the threat. And so the reason why Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz, as I've explained in the past, is because they have already demonstrated in the past their ability to strike and damage or potentially sink these oil tankers or cargo ships that are stuck in the strait or trying to pass through it. They've done it in the past already. They've done it literally on a bi-weekly basis, it seems, where it's like every other week they're striking another one, sometimes every week, sometimes multiple times a week, sometimes multiple ships in a day. That's all it takes. And it goes back to what I mentioned being one of the major problems expense-wise here. It goes back to the insurance companies in large part. They will not insure ships that they know or believe sustain a great chance of being damaged by Iran or sunk even. It's not a good business decision for the insurance company. So that's one of the big holdups here. And so Iran has demonstrated this. They have a proof of concept. So their word is bond now. If Iran says the strait is closed, Trump can cry and whine about it all he wants on his Truth Social app and say it's open actually, we have our ships there, we'll protect you. That's fallen short in the past. It has literally failed in the past multiple times now. In fact, because of Trump, some oil tankers made a break for it in an attempt to exit the strait, and they were literally set ablaze. They were hit and set on fire by Iran. There was the I believe it was the Korean tanker, the South Korean tanker. Trump literally announced on Truth Social, the strait is open. Pass through it right now. Pass through it. It's open. Don't listen to Iran. It is open. And this Korean tanker tried to desperately exit. Oh boy, it's open. They got struck. And borderline sunk, and the crew had to be rescued, if I remember correctly. So that's what control means. People say, but we have a blockade there. Doesn't matter. A blockade doesn't reopen the strait. It's literally illogical. It's like illogical. It's like a logical paradox or fallacy. I don't know what to even call it. Because it's like Iran says, no, it's closed. And then Trump says, oh yeah, well, we're closing it with our blockade too, which now means it's open. What now? And it's like, oh no, actually it's just, you've just closed it even more. So that's where we're at on that. And that's what people need to understand. Now, Iran taunting Trump, like I said, and daring him to commit to full boots on the ground war invasion, basically. They're daring him specifically to take Karg Island. And we've gone over Karg Island at length on this channel here. And they basically promised him now at this point that Iran is ready. They literally have said, Iran is ready for you to try to take Karg Island. We want you to try to take it. Try, President Trump. Try to take Karg Island. And on this channel, I've explained why that decision would be one of the worst decisions Trump could make in this war, short of a full ground war invasion on Iranian mainland and or short of nuclear escalation, which neither he has tried to do yet, thankfully. But Trump has already admitted that they are talking about escalating with Karg Island in the Situation Room, so they are floating the idea. Iran is daring them, and in summary, I won't go over massive details on why it's bad, but in summary, what you need to understand with Karg Island is we basically elected to bomb Karg Island towards the end of the initial strikes on Iran back in March. And at the time, some people were touting this as good strategy and creative thinking on Trump's part because, like I mentioned earlier, Karg Island is responsible for 90% of Iran's oil exports. And when Trump bombed Karg Island, to his credit, the U.S. military strategy was to bomb the east and west side, but to leave the center intact, because the east and west side contained all of the military units and and armaments and equipment and bases, and the middle is where the infrastructure for oil is located. So Trump actually deliberately didn't destroy that, and it was smart. It was smart not to, for a multitude of reasons. First of all, if we ever wanted to possibly try to seize Karg Island, if the oil infrastructure is intact, we could actually take control of that in a crazy fantasy world, but theoretically we could do that, or at least try to, and if it's not destroyed, then we could try to at least do that, and that would be actually incredible if we pulled it off. But I do think that that's pretty fanfic level writing right there to even imagine a possible reality where we actually succeed in doing that. But nevertheless, that's one of the reasons why it's smart. Beyond that, the more realistic reason why it's smart is because even if Iran is our enemy now, our biggest issue as a result of this is going to be the global economy and the global oil supply. And Iran, like I said, exports 90% of their oil through Karg Island. If we destroy that infrastructure, then even when this all ends and concludes, Iran can't just return to exporting all of that oil through Karg Island. They'll have to rebuild the infrastructure, which could take, in some cases, years. So it would be a major setback to the global economy in regards to that, because Iran is a major oil player in the world, even if they are our enemy. So it was wise for Trump to do it the way that he did. And now it has set up a possible reality where Trump is looking at it and thinking, maybe we should just take it. We deliberately left it intact. We could just seize control of it. But I've explained why, beyond the initial strategy of Trump bombing it the way that he did and leaving the oil intact, I've explained why it is completely unrealistic for the U.S. to take Karg Island. It is only 11 or 12 miles, nautical miles, offshore of the Iranian mainland. And we will never be able to launch a campaign that controls the Iranian mainland. They're too large of a country with too powerful of a military. We will never be able to take control of Iran. I think we should just accept that. We couldn't even do what we needed to do in Iraq or Afghanistan, and Iraq is only a third of the size. Iran has a actual established military with 4 different factions. They have a parliament. They have 92 million people living in it, most of whom are galvanized and radicalized against America right now, as we saw during Ali Khamenei's funeral, where pretty much it seemed like the entire country took to the streets to mourn the death of their holy leader. We've blown up their school, killed 107 school children. We've taken out their bridges. We have killed civilians. They despise us. They chant death to America. There is no Persian liberation on the table. There never was. Instead, it's a rally around the flag. So that is why we will never really be able to conquer Iran, because though we are a superpower, Iran is not a complete third world country with no military. They're too strong and they can defend way too easily against us. Which means if we can't do anything in the Iranian mainland, which we really can't, then taking Karg Island, which only sits 11 or 12 miles offshore of Iran, is a terrible idea, because from the Iranian mainland, they will be able to just continually bombard Karg Island. So, and I've gone over that in the past. In summary, they already have likely booby-trapped the ever-living shit out of Karg Island with tripwires and claymores and all kinds of IEDs, which Iran is like the godfather nation of creating, back when we were in the Middle East in the early 2000s anyway. So they've already probably booby-trapped it. They probably re-fortified the island with militant soldiers and, machine guns, and on the back of pickup trucks, as ghetto as it is, militarily speaking, it gets the job done. They've probably mined the entire coastline of Karg, or at least a good portion of it, to set up and prevent our amphibious vehicles from being able to basically sail up to the island and storm the beach and unload soldiers. And then in addition to that, even if we survived all of that, which, by the way, many soldiers wouldn't, the taking of Karg Island would be bloody, brutal, and filled with death on both sides. We likely could conquer the island. We would be able to overpower Iran in that regard, but it would cost us a lot of lives, and then the real issue would be holding the island, which is what I've explained in the past, because it's only 12 miles offshore. So it would be pre-sighted for attacks from all various different kinds of weapons: drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, artillery fire, etc. So holding it would be even more bloody and would cost us more lives, and for what purpose? If the purpose was to take control of the oil infrastructure, Iran has demonstrated a capacity to go scorched earth out of spite alone in order to punish us even more. They would be just as soon to just destroy their own oil infrastructure, knowing the full cost of that to them, just to be able to ensure we can't profit off of it. Because Iran, at the end of the day now, is playing scorched earth out of spite, because they want to make Trump look bad. They want to humiliate him for ever starting this war, and above all else, they want us to pay the price and to suffer for it. So that would be the most likely outcome. And if it's not to control the oil infrastructure, then what other reason would there be to do it, other than to try to use it as a future launching point for the airborne division, so we could try to commit to inland operations using the airborne? But that, again, would be beyond stupid and foolish. So there's no real good reason, and it's not feasible for all of those reasons. Now, additionally, one of our other big problems we're running into in the Middle East, which is becoming increasingly more evident, and something that I once again was very ahead of the curve on when it came to talking about on this channel, is the very fact that we are just running out of everything. Time has been the biggest constraint, along with munitions and supplies, etc., when it comes to the Trump administration. It's been the time constraint that I've warned about pretty much since day 2 of this war, when it comes to how it will work against Trump much faster and more effectively than the time constraint will work against Iran, which is a country that literally can't pick up and leave, so defense is their only option to begin with anyway. With Trump, he has multiple technical different options, including literally the simplest one at this point of just walking away, which is we're almost at the point now where it's like that would be the best possible outcome in all of this, but Trump is very unlikely to do it. But I've warned that the standard of victory would be a lot higher for Trump as opposed to Iran, which they just need to survive in order to claim victory at this point. Trump needs to go through a grocery list that's ever growing of accomplishments in order to demonstrate victory to the American people and to the world for that matter. And time is the constraint because, as I've been warning about, we are expending through our armaments, our munitions, our missiles, etc. All the while, the global economy is suffering. Oil is running out. Our strategic oil reserves are pretty much all dried up now. And midterms are even more quickly approaching than they were when I originally warned about them all the way back in March and April. Specifically, when it comes to munitions, I now have some updated figures for you here. It looks like we are now sitting at around 1,500 PAC-3 missiles left. These would be interceptor type missiles, kind of. They're very defensive. They're used for shooting down Iran's ballistic missiles. And bear in mind, of course, from what I was able to research, it takes two PAC-3 missiles to target and successfully shoot down a ballistic missile, one ballistic missile. And so if we only have 1,500 of those left, it looks like we really only have around 750 incidences or possible defense scenarios that we can continue to survive through. By the way, whoever sent that massive gift just now, that jewel gift, is that Grim Reaper there? Uncle Alert, he says. Well, thank you for that, Grim Reaper. I appreciate that a lot for that gift. I really do. So thank you for that gift. THAAD missiles, we are almost entirely out of. I had been warning about the THAAD missiles forever now. Now, THAAD missiles are basically, we have those dispersed all across the world, and we pulled a lot of those out of the Indo-Pacific region, where we really should have been concentrating more of those for the sake of keeping an eye on China. But because Israel demanded this war, and we have to protect our greatest ally filled with God's chosen people, we pulled out a lot of the THAAD missiles, we pulled out a lot of the THAAD systems, I should say, and relocated them to the Middle East. And then we burned through a lot of that. And so now we're almost entirely out of them. Tomahawks, the same kind of missile that we used to blow up the school and kill 107 children in Iran, we have about 2,000 of those left. JASSM rockets, about 1,400, and precision strike missiles, just like the THAAD missiles, are pretty much entirely gone. So we are running incredibly low on that. And the worst part about this is our ability to sustain bombing runs and defense the way we want and basically need to at this point is running out as a result of this. And it's really actually past the point of recklessness now on Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's part to continue doing it the way that they're doing it, knowing that all of this is running critically low in many cases. And really, it's because of several different circumstances and realities here that this is beyond the point of recklessness. But again, it's really a time constraint thing beyond even just the munitions running out. So when it comes, and I'll explain it like this, when it comes to Trump being able to demand more escalation in Iran and demand a continuance of bombing them, there's a time constraint because of the munitions running out. But the munitions themselves running out, there comes several constraints with that makes this even worse and compounds on this. So I have this chart. This was a chart that was released by Telegraph UK here, and they're basically going over this, the key munitions, the expense that it costs, and the time to deliver them and replenish them, essentially. And it is interesting. So the THAAD, like I was talking about, the THAAD systems here. Well, THAAD comes with a cost of $15.5 million, and the delivery time is 53 months. 53 months, $15.5 million. Now, JASSM, what are they? JASSM 2, I believe it's called. $2.6 million unit cost, 48-month delivery time. Tomahawks, we have 2,000 of those left. Those are also $2.6 million when it comes to the unit cost, with 47-month delivery time. Patriot interceptors, these are critical for defense in the Middle East, by the way. $3.9 million unit cost, 42-month delivery time. And why does this take so long? That's one of the big questions here. It takes months or years in many cases, like you saw. And here's one of the biggest problems: our dependency on China. And this really goes to, once again, shoot down that very annoying propaganda and rhetoric that's been put out by MAGA that I have shot down every chance I can get. And that is, of course, that, oh, you're just playing checkers and Trump is playing chess. You're just a panicking. I can't believe you would vote for Trump and then turn your back on him like this. You're clearly not a Republican. You're a panican because Trump clearly, I'm smarter than you, obviously, and Trump is playing 5D chess with China right now, and you just can't see it. Like, you're just like clearly playing checkers. First of all, stupid little bitches, I'm probably better than them at chess. I'm a pretty good chess player, actually. Second of all, as I've argued in the past, it's not 5D chess against China. Iran's been the one playing 5D chess against Israel and using Trump as a pawn. Trump's a poker player, not a chess player. Trump has a degree of understanding of strategy, and he has been pretty smart throughout his life in some instances. You can read his stories about sales and real estate. It's not that he's a moron. I don't think he is. I know the liberals will disagree, but I'm not a liberal. And I don't think Trump's a moron. He's clearly a person with an appetite for success and a will to achieve it. And real estate wise, where he actually plays well and actually makes good strategical decisions based off of the stories I've read, he is smart. He has done good when it comes to that. When it comes to geopolitics, though, and war, and the politics of other countries, and dealing with foreign nations and their leaders, and understanding their culture, and really understanding what's at play here, it's very clear he has next to no understanding, and he himself may be a zealot due to some of his personal connections with people like Jared Kushner. And I think that clouds his mind a lot. I think what also clouds his mind is he's very clearly a boomer who lived through the peak of America, the peak economic decade of America being the 80s. And in my opinion, what was the peak military power of America being the 1990s. And so he has this very revisionist history on what America's economy can be and should be, or really what he even tries to say it is. And he also has this very revisionist take on how powerful our military is, which is undeniably powerful. But in Trump's mind, sadly, as almost lovable as it is, or endearing as this is for Trump to view America this way, it's not true, and now it's causing a lot of problems that he's so unrealistic because he just tends to think our military is unstoppable and can conquer anything. And so Trump doesn't know what he's doing, and he's a poker player then, because he has to then try to bluff his way out, and then when his bluff is called, he has to then taco out, which is very clearly what he's done in the past many times now, because of his hubris of America getting him really too deep, in way too deep, to positions that he should have never stepped in to begin with. And so he's a good poker player, but the weakness is finding the bluff and calling it. And sadly, with Trump at this point, because of how in deep he is and how bad of a decision this all was, the bluffs are very obvious. Now, that brings me back to China. This is not 5D chess against China, as I've explained in the past, and this is one of the more fine examples of this. Why does it take so long to replenish these missiles and all of our armaments that we're expending through? Because we rely on China. And this is where China is going to rear its ugly dragon head and remind us of that without a doubt. How they'll remind us is up for debate still right now and really remains to be seen, but time will certainly tell. And what you have to understand is these armaments, these missiles, what we're talking about here, relies on rare earth minerals. And if you're not understanding what I'm implying there, China is responsible for processing literally about 94% of the rare earth mineral supply. America never got around to doing that. Something that we should have done literally 15 years ago, we should have started, we would have been actually okay. But we never actually got around to doing that because the neocons and the stupid fucking Republicans of the 90s, along with the Democrats who kind of protested it but didn't have the balls to do anything, and in some cases they themselves were okay with this, sold all of our shit overseas to China to make everything cheaper. The 80s economy for the boomer me generation filled with greed apparently wasn't good enough. Why settle for great when it could be possibly even better, even if it comes with a lot of inherent risks? We won't have to deal with that. The millennials and the Gen Zers, our children and grandchildren, they can fix that problem. We'll create it now knowing we're possibly creating it, but at least benefiting for the next 15 years with cheap Chinese shit because of the labor. Send it all overseas. No jobs for our children, cheaper quality products, but at least it cost us even less. And sadly, that included a lot of other things that we shouldn't be dependent on China for. Medical stuff, rare earth minerals, military equipment even. We are so fucking stupid for having done it. And now here we sit in this position where we have Trump unable to recognize the hopelessness of the situation that is the Iran war, and instead leans into escalation more and more, meaning we burn through more and more of our military supplies, our weapons basically, and we're dependent on China for those. Not just for the rare earth minerals that are involved in creating many of them, by the way, but also just for the equipment in general. We have a large portion, the majority portion of our factories in China. Specifically, it's neodymium is one of the rare earth minerals that's responsible for creating the magnets that power the guidance systems for our JASSM rockets, our Tomahawks, and precision interceptors. So again, unlike what the 5D chessers out there, oh, you're panicking, oh, no, Trump is not defeating China right now. Trump is actually throwing us at the mercy of China. Beijing will have all kinds of leverage now over us, and it's just one more way that they can literally figure out what they want to do about this. So in addition to that too, they're coming back on the oil market now as well. So they are coming back, and they're going to have tons of leverage spread across various different facets of the economy and our production. As I warned about, China, the reason why I had to endure being called a panikin for so many months when we saw the oil futures markets not respond as volatilely as, if that's even the right way to say that, the oil markets weren't as volatile as many would have thought. And people were saying, see, Trump's got it all planned out, bro. The oil markets are responding just fine. They're responding just fine. They're actually going down. They're actually going down, and we're bombing Iran. How is that happening? You just don't know what you're talking about, man. Well, here's the deal. Iran has the largest private oil reserve out of pretty much any nation. They are basically able to survive off their oil reserves for about 110 to 120 days. So just understand that's about 4 months, right? Our oil reserves are large, but ours are already dried up. China pretty much went right into their private oil reserves the second Trump started bombing Iran. I believe China started tapping their oil reserves somewhere around March 3rd or 4th. Literally 4 or 5 days in, China recognized what this was very likely going to turn into. So they took themselves more so off the global oil market and leaned on their reserves more. If you understand the laws of supply and demand, that means in China's absence, the demand actually went down, which allowed the supply to not be drained as much despite the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. So while many people from a basic standpoint were saying that with the Strait of Hormuz shut down, that's about 20% of the global oil supply now shut down, which means everything's going to get bad. And it did for quite a while, and we saw gas hike up. But what people were predicting gas would be at by now, $10 a gallon, I've heard, it's not there. Not because of anything Trump did, but because China took themselves off the market, and they've been leaning on their oil reserves ever since, until now. They are now officially coming back on the oil market, and that law of supply and demand is really going to come back to bite Trump and America, and the world for that matter, in the ass, when all of a sudden the demand skyrockets because China is a massive country that will be using tons of oil per day. And now that they're back on the market, they're going to be buying a lot of that oil while the Strait of Hormuz is still almost entirely shut down. And now the Houthis have shut down Bab Al Mandeb, another 8 to 12%. So when they do that, they're going to have even more potential leverage because the global economy is going to respond in a shock. The oil futures traders who have been gaslit by Trump are going to be devastated by this, and many of them will go broke. Our oil reserves are literally dried up. The Trumpers, the MAGA cultists, were basically saying, oh, Trump is so smart. Look at how he's turning lemons into lemonade. He's selling our strategic oil reserve supply to other countries now, including China themselves. Now you can see why that was so fucking stupid. The only people, by the way, that benefit from that, it's not you American goyim scum who benefit when Trump sells strategic oil reserve supply to other countries. People were celebrating that as if they were getting richer from it. Trump is so great. Oh, you don't see a dime of that. The oil execs made the money, and Trump more quickly depleted our own oil reserves as a result, and China bought some of it to buy more time on their own oil reserves. It was all about strategy, and Trump was making the worst decisions possible in all of it. Worst decisions for you, that is. Trump will be just fine. You won't be. So that's what's happening now. In addition to that, I want to remind people, and I did a half of an episode dedicated to this as well, a possibility, and I don't think it's likely for the record. Depends on how bad this gets, though. As it stands right now, I don't think it's likely, but you also have to keep in mind that China owns hundreds of millions of dollars of our U.S. Treasury bonds. And if they dump that, our economy literally bursts like a bubble, especially if the oil markets are not stable, especially if they become more volatile, especially if both these straits remain shut down, especially if inflation starts shooting up. If China dumps the U.S. Treasury bonds that they own, that's horrendous news. Wait till you see what interest rates are like then. The economy will burst. So they have leverage over us with that. They have leverage over us with the oil markets. And they have leverage over us when it comes to production, since we cucked ourselves to China all throughout kind of the 80s and definitely the 90s. And they have leverage over us with rare earth minerals, which is what we're totally dependent on when it comes to our own military defense and our ability for military output. So I just want you to understand something here. When people say Trump's playing 5D chess against China, just look on that person with pity, because they have the IQ of a dog and they don't actually understand how geopolitics plays out or what's really happening behind the scenes here, because Trump is literally putting us at China's mercy with every day he continues this Iran war. And like I said, our oil reserves are dried up, the strait still isn't open, and being basically one of the biggest long-term problems in all of this is that the oil markets are not going to be better anytime soon. So safety of passage is one of the biggest issues here. And this is the other delusion that I want to shatter here right now. In many people's minds, basically, all of these straits get reopened the second that this war ends. And that's kind of true. But that doesn't mean the oil markets return to normal anytime soon. And safety of passage is the biggest problem now. This will not be forgotten easily, which means that many ships will be hesitant to leave, or especially to re-enter, especially because, again, coming back to the insurance companies, they just watched all of this unfold at a moment's notice with no heads up. So the insurance companies now are going to be way less likely to insure passage or insure ships trying to make a passage through either of these straits. And this will go on for years, potentially, which means that these straits will not be restored to full capacity for months or years. And again, actually, it's the Bab Al Mandeb Strait, as I pointed out in the past, that's one of the greatest examples of this, because the Bab Al Mandeb was shut down by the Houthis somewhere around 2.5 years ago. And they were launching their missiles, and the Houthis are nowhere near as credible of a threat as Iran is. But the fact that they were even trying was more than enough to force the Bab Al Mandeb to a grinding halt. And recognize where the Bab Al Mandeb was sitting capacity-wise, even up until pretty much now, where they re-shut it down again. Even just a few weeks ago, the Bab Al Mandeb, as opposed to 2.5 years ago when it was first shut down by the Houthis, was only restored to 75% of its normal capacity. Because insurance companies and oil tankers and the crews don't want to risk it. And they've been proven right again, by the way, because now the Houthis have said it's shut down, which comes with the implied threat of violence in order to impose that. So that was the Bab Al Mandeb. What's it going to be for the Strait of Hormuz, which is responsible for even more oil and has seen much more destruction in its waters over the last several months? It could take years for the Strait of Hormuz to be restored to full capacity. And even when it is, we won't really know what that fully looks like right now. But what you have to understand is with the Bab Al Mandeb, this was a semi-permanent change in the oil markets. It's why gas was a problem still even under Trump, and why it was a problem under Biden, etc. It was a semi-permanent change because of the fear index centered around the oil markets traders, the insurance companies especially. It's going to be the same for the Strait of Hormuz. It's going to be a semi-permanent, very long-term change in the oil markets, but at a bigger level. And also, this leads me to my next point in all of this. By the way, I missed a super chat, didn't I? It's too late to find that? Oh, no, it's not. Stop everything real quick. I try to always stop everything for the super chats. We do have a $2 super chat tariff from Michael Cox, who says, America is fatigued of being the world's policeman. And I completely agree with you there. Also, I do want to recognize there was a $2 super chat from Howard Clegg. He's our resident cool boomer. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Army Targeting Officer, 39-year veteran of that. Very smart guy. Always backs up what I'm saying for the most part. And I appreciate the support from that as well, Howard, very much. Now, on point here, back on point here, with that out of the way, it leads me to my next point in all of this, which is the economy. Just need to sip some water. I've been talking for like an hour straight without a sip of water. And this is going to be a loaded show, so I'm nowhere near done. But the economy here, this is the latest reading on that. Because if we're being honest here, most Americans concerned now, as even some of the most hardcore MAGA cultists out there. And I say this as I am a conservative, but I'm just not a cultist. I'm not going to live in delusion. Even the most hardcore MAGA cultists now are going to experience the very creeping feeling of doubt creeping its way up when it comes to Trump's handling of this and really the economy. And rightfully so, because we all should be very concerned. Now, hang on a second here. Let me ban this Jew. So, there is something very alarming hitting the economic radar here when it comes to what we have seen in this Trump economy. I've covered in a prior episode, the last time I talked about the Middle East, which was a couple of episodes ago, I went over the 1970s oil crisis pretty much playing out. It played out very similarly to this back then, and what that resulted in, which was a 16-year stagflation period from 1967 until about 1983, I believe it was, and then we saw the 80s economy boom, of course, finally, but it took 16 years throughout the late 60s and into all of the 70s pretty much and the early 80s for it to level out and be restored. And it was all about the same region and the same stuff. It was oil at play. And I went over that in the past and explained, the interest rates were high and this is what's going to happen and history is rhythmic. Now there's something else alarming hitting the economic radar here when it comes to the Trump economy. And that has to do with the inflation and the latest inflation report, which I promised on this channel we would go over. Many people were predicting, myself included, that the inflation would be up for the month of June. It only made sense that it would be, right? And this was short-sighted of me, particularly for not being able to forecast the long term and what the pattern would be on this. We were wrong. Inflation went down for June. So what we saw, of course, was inflation skyrocket for March. We went into this war February 28th with an inflation rate that was at, I think, like 2.4%, shot up to 2.7, and then after March, it hit 3.5, which is where we're at again right now. It shot up a full 8 points, basically, from 2.7 to 3.5 for March because of the war, which made a lot of sense. And then we saw it go from 3.5. I accurately predicted that it would be up to 4.1%, which, of course, it also was. But basically, I had said the trajectory looks like we're going to hit 6% inflation for June, and instead it actually went down from 4.2 to 3.5. And the MAGA cultists were celebrating this. These are the chuds of the world, and they were saying, see, you got to trust in Trump. Trust in Trump. We don't really trust in God, but we trust in Trump. Don't be a panicking. But the reality of this is not good. And I'm going to explain why. Just like how the economic the economic markers always indicate this, and I've gone over this before in the past as well. Just like how, if you ever live to see such times where the inflation is going up and the stock market is going up, that almost always signals a massive transfer of wealth from the low class to the upper class. We saw it under Biden during COVID, his terrible mismanaging of the economy. 9.1% inflation under Biden. They changed the definition of inflation to dodge around it. And the stock market soared because Biden artificially pumped the economy full of fake jobs, government jobs, bullshit, stimulus checks, etc., all the spending, some of which was Trump's idea, by the way. And Trump is not exonerated from that. Biden was a terrible president, but in some ways, Trump actually initiated that. And that's important to recognize even as a conservative. But it doesn't exonerate Biden at all, and Biden is largely to blame for it. And we saw it under Biden, and it was a massive transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. We saw it again at the start of this war under Trump, and I pointed it out and I said, it is happening again. We are seeing a transfer of wealth from poor to rich. The stock market's shooting up to record highs while inflation rises. It's not always, in every case, a sign of that, of a wealth transfer, but it almost always is. And it was under Biden, and it was a few months ago under Trump. It's an AI bubble that's been created, actually, and it's wealthy people investing in AI, especially because Americans despise AI. But that's a little bit of a tangent there. I'll end it there. But that's just like how that's the case here, and it's almost always an indicator. It's no different than if you see inflation going up, it's no different than if you basically see oil prices going up and inflation starts to flatten or even drops like we just saw. Because oil prices are up and they've been going up, and inflation started to flatten out and then declined. And that's not good because oil and increased prices for gas means that it's basically de facto inflationary. So there's almost no reason that the inflation should have went down except for this. It's called demand destruction. And this is basically when prices of energy get so high that people who, of course, must pay those prices, energy is not a choice in 2026. Nobody rides a horse, so you're filling up your car with gas. And some people have electric cars, but not nearly as many. And even if you have an electric car, your electric cost is going up anyway because of data center construction. So it doesn't really matter. You're not dodging the energy price hike either way. And most people are affected by the oil price increase. You're paying more for your food because the trucking companies still use oil. They're not electric. So either way, you're paying more because of the gas prices, even if you own electric. It doesn't matter. And demand destruction is when prices begin to get so high for energy that people simply stop buying as much everywhere else. They have to now budget more for energy prices. So they spend even less. And it's less consumerism. It's demand destruction. And it's essentially halted consumerism in general. And this means that Americans are literally struggling so hard right now to deal with the increased energy costs as a result of the Iran war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz that they're just no longer spending the same amount on their food or on cars or purchases in general. And when this happens, it always happens this way. And this is what I want to warn people about right now. It shows up as a 1 or even sometimes 2 month period where inflation drops while oil prices go up. Gas goes up. Inflation will go down for a month, sometimes 2 months. And it's always celebrated at the time too as an achievement in the economy. But it's always the calm before the storm. Because the last time we saw this play out this way on a major scale was in 2007 and really the year 2008. And what was the year 2008 here in America? Anybody who's older than Gen Z, and many Gen Zers already know about this because they were growing up during this period of time with millennials. We were the children, but we remember 2008. This pattern played out the same way in 2008, actually, and that's why I've got my eyes on this. So in 2008, price per barrel of oil shot up to $140. And inflation started flattening and even downtrending. And it did that for 2 months, and then massive recession. And we are essentially in the same circumstances right now And really, truthfully, we're actually in worse circumstances in many ways. When it comes to the housing market crashes, they tend to happen in 18-year intervals, and 2008 was 18 years ago. So we are due for a housing market crash. We are due for inflation shooting up because of oil prices going up. And oil prices are going to continue going up if this war continues to go on. The Bab Al Mandeb is closed, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the oil futures markets responded appropriately today. Trump cannot continue to gaslight the oil futures traders because our strategic oil reserves are dried up. They're gone. Oil traders will respond to what Trump says for a while, but then they'll ultimately be forced to bend to the will that is reality. Also, what we are seeing too is a cost of living crisis, especially for young people. So the housing market's terrible, cost of living's already bad. Inflation's now going, it went down last month, but it's been going up since the start of this war overall. And even at 3.5% for June, yes, it's down from 4.2, but 3.5 is still up significantly from where we were at the beginning of this year, which was 2.1 or 2.4%. We were closing in on the holy grail of economists, and that is, of course, under 2%. Kevin Warsh has become the head of the Federal Reserve now. He won't be able to lower the interest rates because the inflation will be going up. He'll actually have to wind up raising them. And all of this is going to be happening just in time for midterms. This will sink Republicans if it happens just in time for midterms. And really think about it. If it's going to be a 2-month pattern, if inflation goes down again for the July report and then skyrockets for the August report that we will not get until September 10th, then just understand September 10th or 11th or 12th, depending on when the 10th falls on, if it's a weekend or not, that's when you always get the report for the prior month's economy report for the inflation. It's always on the 10th through the 12th of each month. So September 10th, 11th, or 12th is when we will find out about August's inflation, and that could be the month where we are essentially in a recession, a massive recession, comparable to 2008 and very likely even worse. So that's what's in store right now, and that's what I see being a large possibility for us. Summer will end with a massive recession. It seems very likely. Now, all the while that's unfolding, we are seeing massive political theater unfolding here in the United States as well. So shifting out of the Middle East, that's your Middle East report for you, by the way. In addition to that, I did want to point out to Howard Clegg, who has disagreed with my assessment one time, and that was in regards to the Kurds. I don't know if he still disagrees with it, and I actually understand entirely why. It has to deal with Turkey and what we've decided to do with Turkey, as opposed to what Israel is getting ready to do with Turkey. And the Kurds, of course, despise Turkey, so it is very complicated. But at one point, I had announced that I thought that Trump might seek to recruit the Kurds, as America has done in the past. And while I'm not really hearing about a follow-through on that thought, what is making the news is that Iran has been bombing the shit out of northern Iraq, and they are targeting the Kurds. So Iran believes, at least, that there's enough of a possibility of this happening, that they're taking preemptive measures. And this would be a way for Trump to avoid boots on the ground. I've discussed that before and why I thought it was possible, at least at first. But in my opinion, it would just be another rung on the escalation ladder. The Kurds would go in, they would not succeed, and then we would back them up with boots on the ground of our own. So it doesn't really matter either way, but I did want to announce that as well. And Howard, if you're still in chat, I'd love to know what you think about that. But either way, we're going to move out of the Middle East now, and we're going to get into the political theater that's unfolding. It does tie in with the Middle East regardless, as pretty much all of our politics do now at this point. But there is a lot of news regarding Zohran Mamdani, Benjamin Netanyahu, really Marco Rubio. So that's what we're going to cover next. But first, be sure to like the stream if you're enjoying the show. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button because it's free to do, and it really does help encourage YouTube's algorithm to push this show out to more people who need to see reporting like this, frankly. They need to hear the truth, and they're not going to get it from the mainstream media sources. So like the stream, don't be a cheap goyim scum, like the stream because it's free. Move your fat thumbs over your phone screen, hit the thumbs up button or double tap the phone screen. It's really that simple, and it goes a long way to supporting the channel. And let's be honest, I fucking deserve the like. It's the least you could do. You purposeless goyim. Like, you're sitting there, you're getting off on the dopamine rush of browsing YouTube shorts, you pathetic low-life scum. Like, why aren't you in bed? Either go to bed or like the stream. Seriously, get a life. Also subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live pretty much every single night. So, I wanted to go over this. This is Zohran Mamdani here. And this story all ties in with essentially lol cow, says David. This all ties in with Zohran Mamdani. This all ties in with Benjamin Netanyahu, who was scheduled already to have made a visit again for what will be the 9th time in a year and a half, I believe. He's scheduled to be visiting the United States and America, and he was supposed to have already made the visit, but he had to delay that because of the war and everything else. So now that scheduled visit has been delayed until September, I think, from the reports I was reading. And in preparation of that visit, the Muslim Democratic Socialist mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old millennial mayor, has basically, in an interview situation, kind of looking like a podcast here, he made a statement about this, outright saying that he is in full preparation and looking into that now to possibly arrest the Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu should he step foot in New York City, flying in perhaps to JFK or LaGuardia, right? And he said that in this clip. I have the clip pulled up actually here. I'm going to play the audio of it for you guys to listen to right now.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is perhaps planning to visit New York for the UN General Assembly. You pledged during your campaign and after you won to order his arrest to comply with the International Criminal Court warrant. What will happen if he comes in September?
I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu belongs in The Hague. He's a war criminal who has been charged by the International Criminal Court. And what you will find is that is an opinion that is held by many purely because of what his actions have wrought over these last many years. I've also said that I will follow the laws that we have here in New York City because I believe that there's an importance in following the law as a leader who presides over our city, and that's something that I plan to do.
Meaning? I'm sorry, I don't understand what that means.
Meaning that whatever the law allows me to do in New York City, that's what we will do, but we won't be writing our own laws to that end.
What does the law allow you to do?
That's an active conversation with our legal department in seeing what the prospects are we have here in our municipality. However, what we've seen at the national level is a desire sometimes to write your own laws, to go outside of the bounds of legality. That's not something we have an interest in.
So he says if the law allows it, that he will arrest Benjamin Netanyahu on the charges of being an international war criminal. And I want to go over this because this is political theater. And I don't mean that actually disparagingly. What I mean is it's political strategy unfolding before our very eyes as, once again, we hit the road to midterms. It's like WWE. The road to WrestleMania is always the most exciting period of time if you're a WWE fan. We're entering that. When August, I think it's August 4th is always the deadline for certain things politically. August, September, and October are the road to the midterms. And in preparation of that, we are just like 2 weeks away from officially being able to say that. And they're getting a jump on it now. We've seen numerous special elections playing out, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, of Democratic Socialists rising up and winning the primaries in their districts. In many cases, taking down incumbent Democrats that are boomers that have been around for years. And so the tide is shifting in the Democrats. And there's a very major shift taking place before our very eyes as we are in what I call, or what more accurately, there's a book called this, The Fourth Turning. The old ways and the old establishment are being torn down. There's not a choice in this matter. They're being torn down. And in many cases, they're actually being torn down on both sides of the aisle because the youth are tearing it down. The boomers are fighting to maintain it. And it's the youth, being Gen Z Republican bros or liberal Democratic Socialists themselves, who are millennial and Gen Z as well. Either way, either direction you look, you have the far right and the far left that many people erroneously tie into and associate as the horseshoe theory that has come full circle on the topic of Israel. Now, I disagree with horseshoe theory, as I've explained many times on this channel, because the parties are so divided nowadays that it is literally morality itself that cuts that horseshoe in half and prevents it from being factual. But nevertheless, on the topic of Israel, it does make it seem as though it's a real theory that's actually credible, because the far right and the far left despise Israel. And both now, the far right and far left, are becoming more comprised of the youth, of the millennials, and of the Gen Zers. And so this is important to understand here. Zohran Mamdani almost certainly will not be arresting Benjamin Netanyahu, even if Benjamin Netanyahu steps foot in New York City, especially because actually President Donald Trump responded to this. Now, he didn't name Zohran Mamdani by name in his Truth Social, but he put this Truth Social out today, and it says, I'll read it in his voice for the lol call. I'll read it in his voice to be a lol call. Benjamin Netanyahu will not be arrested in any way, shape, or form while in the United States of America. He is fighting against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has recently killed 52,000 innocent protesters and has spent the last 47 years killing American soldiers and others. The only ones that should be arrested are the people that led Iran into this unprecedented spiral of death and destruction. Something that should have been dealt with years ago by previous presidents, President Donald J. Trump. That's a response to Mamdani. He didn't even name him, but he basically said, no, Netanyahu will not be arrested in any way, shape, or form while in the United States of America. And that's going to be true, obviously, sadly, because I actually do despise Netanyahu, and I despise Israel in general, and I think that they're filled with Zionist pigs, and I do believe most of them deserve to be arrested, prosecuted, imprisoned, and put to death. Then that definitely includes Netanyahu. He is a disgusting war criminal, and he's a disgusting individual, and the world would be better off without him. That being said, and I say that as a conservative, I am the example of the far right, if you didn't understand that by now. Don't think I'm a moderate here. Don't think I'm a Democrat either, but don't think I'm a moderate here. This is a far-right channel, just so you understand. That's why I actually despise Trump. So he's addressing that. And here's what's actually playing out right now. Political theater, like I said, but there's strategy behind it, because we are approaching the midterms. And as I've explained in the past, there's a multitude of reasons why Democratic Socialists are on the rise. And it's basically the conservatives' fault. Now, I'm going to get into in a minute here Marco Rubio and his new focus on Cuba, and how that in and of itself is political strategy unfolding too. But they're trying to blame Cuba for the rise of democratic socialism, and it's just not true in any way, shape, or form. Democratic socialism is rising because the conservatives, at the very least, have always been the ones associated with being fiscally conservative, which comes with the implication of a better economy or more affordability. And we even saw this on display when Trump won in November of 2024. I've referenced this in the past. Many women out there who were upset at the idea that they couldn't terminate their pregnancies anymore and reestablish Roe v. Wade were basically saying that, and I saw this with my own two eyes, I saw multiple women echoing the same statement. And the statement was, I hope your cheaper groceries and gas is worth me not having sovereign rights over my own body and what grows in it. Cry me a river. But what they did by saying that was actually admit, without realizing it, that yes, even they recognize that the economy usually tends to perform better under a Republican because a Republican is more fiscally conservative. That's at least supposed to be the idea. And it hasn't played out that way. Now, last year, there were signs that it was going to get a little bit better, at least. And the tariffs were an interesting idea. And I actually support tariffs, at least the concept of them, not the way they've been implemented by Trump. But historically, we've seen great evidence of tariffs working very well throughout the 1800s. But the tariffs, of course, were one of those things that Trump felt like he had to impose, knowing that it was going to set him back on the economy, at least in the short term. Unfortunately for Trump, he implemented them incorrectly. He's now trying to figure out how to deal with them. And then, because he's an Israel sycophant, he's decided to wage this war, which is destroying the global economy, the global oil markets. It's raising our inflation. It's destroying all hope of any golden age ever coming in. which means prices are going up. Things are not going to get better, especially not for young people. The housing market is ass. And along come democratic socialists. And even if none of what they can promise you is something they can deliver on, the very promise itself being promised by something that is definitely very radically different is more than incentive enough for young people who are now increasingly more and more desperate to just own something, because young people don't really own anything, and they want a family and a home, and they can't even get that. And the Democratic Socialists say, well, we'll focus on you. And I covered that on yesterday's episode, which was more of a religious episode, where I mentioned how socialism gets to masquerade as nationalism, especially when conservatives aren't taking care of business. Because it's the socialists that come along during a time like this and they say, hey, and rightfully so, they say this. Do you see those neocons? Look at where they're spending all of that money. It's disgusting. They're spending it on Israel and on foreign wars and on anybody else other than us. We want free healthcare, and we want a better economy, and we believe that money should be directed towards you. And in principle, they're right. We know they won't implement it right, and we know it will fail, as socialism literally has always failed in the past, and in many cases leads to a death spiral that heads towards communism and overall Marxism and tyranny. But that doesn't change the fact that the promise is enticing and appealing, and that the talking point that they present in order to gain power is actually right in principle. The focus should be on us. The money should be going back to us. And it isn't. It isn't. And the Republicans, the boomer-con Republicans, are to blame. And both sides would agree with that. Gen Z Republican bros will tell you they despise Trump now. They wanted to like Trump, they don't. And rightfully so. And the Democratic Socialists will say the same thing. And so with this being recognized now, it is the Democratic Socialists in this fourth turning, this destruction of the old establishment in ways, that have gotten the jump on this. And they have basically said, well, look at Israel. Why do we support them? It's the Republicans, just like in the fourth turning as well, these boomer-con Republicans, neocon, boomer-con, Israel-worshipping Republicans that say, no, you can't do this. It's Israel. It's not a synagogue of Satan. I don't know how you derive that from reading the Bible. Because we actually study it and they just read it like idiots. It's not a synagogue of Satan. It's full of God's chosen people, and we've got to defend them. And they desperately hold on, trying to shame the future of their party. It's not the Democrats doing this. They are fracturing right now, the Democrats, by the way. They're fracturing. They are actually, in my opinion, and they'll despise hearing this if any of them are in chat listening. They won't like the way I frame this, but it is true. The Democrats, in one way, were behind. And they were behind on the fact that it was MAGA that really, really transformed the Republican Party back in 2015, while they were trying to run Hillary Clinton and then Kamala Harris 2 years ago. So they were behind on that, but they're not only catching up to that, but they're making up for lost ground with Israel. And they're going through their MAGA moment right now. And it's called Democratic Socialists of America, who have identified the correct talking points. They've honed in on what I call the zeitgeist of millennials and Gen Zers, and that is Israel, literally. They're speaking out against AIPAC, foreign influence, foreign aid, and they're saying it should be directed back on us. They're talking about getting big money out of politics. It's Senator Elizabeth Warren, just today, who said, I'm supporting Abdul al-Said because he wants to run grassroots and doesn't want to take AIPAC money or big tech money. It's not the Republicans saying this. The Republicans are taking all of that money. They're taking AIPAC and big tech money. Look to Byron Donalds in Florida. He's taking both. And the grassroots candidate down there, James Fishback for life, Fishback's the future, and I hope he wins. He's the grassroots guy. And how have the Republicans treated him? Not with support, but they've shunned him for being anti-AIPAC, anti-Israel foreign aid. No soldiers should fight and die for Israel, he says. And he gets kicked out of IHOP for it and out of Waffle House and gets no Fox News airtime. And the Republicans treat him like an infidel. And they support publicly Byron Donalds instead. But with the Democrats, you're sort of seeing it sometimes with people like Hakeem Jeffries. He's a bought and paid for Israel shill. but you're seeing a much more prominent split, with many more Democrats recognizing what the future is of the American political landscape. So you have old timers like Elizabeth Warren, and like how I covered Nancy Pelosi herself even sided with the other 103 Republicans that voted against the Israel foreign aid in that bill that Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna proposed. And so they have identified this more, and their party is splitting, but unlike with the Republicans, they're not unified against the anti-Israel messaging, against the anti-AIPAC messaging. They're splitting because many of them are unifying in harmony against the anti-Israel messaging, and they're embracing the youth that are rising up in their party. So what we're seeing on display right now is a 33-year-old millennial Democratic Socialist mayor in New York City who's identified the winning strategy being criticize Israel, and he's doing it by making the ultimate statement. It's grandstanding. It's not realistic. And he knows it's not realistic. He even said we're looking into the law. It's because he's not going to be able to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, but now, because it's gone viral and it's received a response from President Donald Trump, the playing field is as follows. He will now be associated with, oh my God, that guy is so based, he said he would arrest the Prime Minister of Israel because he's a war criminal, and he's a Democratic Socialist. Meanwhile, Trump has spoken out against that and said under no circumstance will the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu be arrested here in America. Under no circumstance. And so it's genius political strategy being played out, really, because not only now is that going to be associated with Zohran Mamdani, and it will be the thing you want to be associated with you in the future as a politician in America, as the fourth turning crumbles and ends, and the youth rise up to replace all of the retarded boomers who worship Israel. You'll want that kind of credibility, and Zohran Mamdani now has it, but it's also now revealed even more so how much of a sycophant Israel-worshipping Zionist shill cuck that Trump is. So it makes the Republicans look worse as well. And Zohran Mamdani didn't even end it there. He already responded tonight to Trump's Truth Social post about Bibi Netanyahu not being placed under arrest while here. This is what he had to say about this.
When it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, we're speaking about someone who's the subject of an international criminal court arrest warrant. And he's the subject of this arrest warrant for alleged crimes against humanity, for war crimes, and he's the architect of the genocide against Palestinians in Gaza as Israel's prime minister. These are not facts of my personal assessment, they are facts of public record. And I believe that when someone is charged with an international criminal court warrant, it's something that should be taken seriously, whether it's Benjamin Netanyahu or it's Vladimir Putin or whomever else. What I've also made clear is that my administration will follow all applicable local laws. That is our commitment. That is something that we will follow through on when it comes to an adherence to local law.
So he still doubles down on it, and that's what's unfolding right now. And this is what Republicans need to be made aware of. They are falling behind, and midterms are coming. Now, what I also wanted to get into here has to deal with Marco Rubio. Again, please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it does help you to push the show out to more people who need to hear this. This is the kind of political analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. Also, subscribe for more content like this. Now, I don't have enough time tonight to go into great detail about what Marco Rubio wants to do with Cuba. But I just wanted to briefly go over the news that is Marco Rubio focusing on Cuba. Because what we saw in the news is the Trump administration has now gone on to make damning new allegations against Cuba as they basically are pinning this democratic socialist movement rising up in America on Cuba. And this is an article from Forbes, and it says, Cuba, the capital of the 21st century communism, is a report that has been released and rehashes tensions between Cuba and the United States stemming from the Cold War, and it casts the Caribbean nation as an ongoing ideological threat to the United States. It also says Cuba, the State Department report says, built a sprawling revolutionary network that shaped a disproportionate share of America's most famous and influential extremist movements. It continues to maintain ties to powerful leftist nonprofits, anti-ICE collectives, socialist groups, and Marxist militant organizations across the United States. It mentions several prominent progressive groups in the United States that are at odds with the Trump administration, and the report notes that leaders of the Black Lives Movement were firmly sided with the Cuban government over the protesters in the streets during the Cuban anti-government protests in 2021. The group didn't express direct support for the Cuban government, but issued a statement urging the United States to lift its embargo on Cuba, which was criticized for failing to blame the Cuban government for economic distress of its own people. Now, who's honing in on this? This is a report that's been released from the Office of the Secretary of State. That is Secretary Marco Rubio. And like I said, I'm not going to go into details on this tonight. I'm running out of time here. But I will remind you of the whole political theater thing. Like we're seeing the strategy unfold, political theater on the stage of Zohran Mamdani, Trump, Netanyahu, the Democratic Socialists, honing in on the zeitgeist, the zeitgeist that is Israel for millennials and Gen Zers, and winning elections off of it. I've explained in the past this, and this is just another reminder of how right I am on this, that Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance are now dividing in the Trump administration right now over the Iran war. And it's been Marco Rubio who has been playing the political game much more effectively, strategically speaking, than J.D. Vance has. J.D. Vance has been, unfortunately for him, associated with this Iran war, where it's been Marco Rubio who has taken the very distant step away from it. I mean, an example of this, for instance, is the peace talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, where who was sent there multiple times to talk with Abbas Araghchi and Mohammad Ghalibaf, the Iranian spokespeople, the foreign ministry agents. It was Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, two Jewish Zionists with no official titles in the administration. You would think that potentially it would be our Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who would be the elegant voice of reason and negotiation, and that he would go there and speak directly with them, but he never did. And when it came time for a higher up to accompany Kushner and Witkoff, since Abbas Araghchi and Ghalibaf and the Iranian parliament in general accurately pointed to them being Jewish Zionists and accusing them of sabotaging the peace talks, it was J.D. Vance who was selected for it. And come to find out, because of back behind the scenes reporting, apparently it was J.D. Vance who begged for the opportunity more than once before Trump finally gave in and caved and said, okay, you can go. Because J.D. Vance recognized that his name was being associated with a president who has turned out to be a neocon again, and he knows how unpopular Israel is as a topic with the youth, who will be increasingly more so voting for him in 2028 as the boomers die off. J.D. Vance won't be able to gain the executive office, the presidency, relying on boomers' votes in 2028 because the boomers are dying off as we speak. So the neocons that love war are dying. Lindsey Graham just passed away recently. Many of the voters are dying. So J.D. Vance knows, especially as a 41-year-old millennial, that Middle East fatigue is real, Israel's not popular, neoconservatism is dead, or should be dead, and anybody who's associated with it will not win future elections. And so he begged for this role because he wanted to at least be seen as the guy who brought about peace and at least got to end the war. And it failed. He went to Islamabad, Pakistan, and failed after 21 hours of brutal negotiating with a few breaks in between. He failed. And now he'll be remembered as a failure. And then it was J.D. Vance who headed up the Memorandum of Understanding, which received massive blowback in the U.S. because it reads as a surrender document to Iran. And that didn't work either anyway. So J.D. Vance is even more associated as a failure as a result of this. And now people are, like myself, have dug into his Peter Thiel connections and Palantir, which should be the real only nail in the coffin needed to ensure nobody votes for him. But either way, J.D. Vance has an insurmountable task coming up when it comes to running for president in 2028. Meanwhile, it's been Marco Rubio who recognized early on the need to criticize Iran, and he did, and he made public statements. And then he recognized over time, over the 4 to 6 week period that we were given by Trump as an estimate for how long this war would go on, which I again accurately analyzed and predicted would be much longer than that. Marco Rubio, what we saw do was the opposite of Vance. Vance tried to hide at the start of this war and then emerged to try to broker in peace and failed. Marco Rubio was out in the forefront at the beginning, projecting strength and making statements about Iran, and then over time slowly backed away as he realized that this war was unwinnable, that Trump's legacy would be destroyed over it, that Iran would remain standing, and that this war would ultimately be the downfall of the GOP and of Trump's second term. And it is. And Marco Rubio now is nowhere to be found when it comes to the Middle East. He didn't try to broker in peace. It was J.D. Vance who did. And Marco Rubio worked behind the scenes more quietly between Israel and Lebanon, which currently do have a peace agreement that is holding up at least thus far. And it's probably because Israel actually loves Marco Rubio. And they actually probably would love the idea of a Rubio presidency in 2028. But since then, now we see Rubio focusing on the Caribbean. His name's going to be associated with the Venezuelan operation, which was considered extremely successful, not a single U.S. casualty. We now have their oil, which we're better off for, and we toppled the regime of Venezuela with the vice president, I believe it was, being a woman, go figure, under Maduro, who's now running Venezuela, but really doing so at our behest. And in the process, we rid Venezuela of the Chinese influence that we want nowhere in our Western Hemisphere. That's what Marco Rubio will be associated with. He declared all of the drug cartels terrorist organizations upon gaining the office of Secretary of State. And now he's focusing on Cuba. So Marco Rubio is playing a much different game here, and that's what I wanted to go over briefly. I'll probably try to get into more details on that tomorrow, though. But that is what you should watch right now. That's called reading in between the lines. Most Americans are incapable of that, but our vote matters, and so we should be doing that. And that's the correct way to look at this. MAGA is done. MAGA died on February 28th. It basically was put on life support last May 2025 when Trump said that the Epstein files were a hoax. And then it limped all the way along throughout 2025, had a brief resurgency period, like a star before it was about to burn out, with Venezuela. I loved Venezuela, and a lot of Americans did too. And that was like the star hitting supernova right before it burnt out. Because then the burnout came when Benjamin Netanyahu forced Trump into the Middle East again. And the second that we bombed Iran without provocation was the second MAGA truthfully died. And it was always going to die because without Trump, there is no MAGA. But Trump decided to kill it himself before it could even die off of natural causes. And in recognition of this, now the future is basically who will Republicans have the vote for in the primaries for 2027, 2028. And that's the battle that's unfolding right now as the Trump administration fractures over Israel and over Iran. And that's what to watch if you're a conservative. Otherwise, that's all I've got to say about that. Like I said, be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens. Hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do. You'll never hear an analysis like that on YouTube anywhere else. I'm literally the smartest YouTuber you've ever watched. It's not even close. Nobody has my charisma. Nobody has my sheer intellect. None of it. Nobody has my prediction capabilities except for maybe Alex Jones because he's literally a prophet. But otherwise, like the stream because it's free. Don't be a cheap goy scum bitch. Like the stream, double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button, and subscribe for more content like that. I go live every single night. Turn on post notifications when you subscribe so you're notified every time I go live. Pure Palm 9078 says, great stream as always, man. Kind blessings. Back at you, Pure Palm, and I appreciate you being here. Additionally, let's see what's going on here. We have Mike Hunt, who's back for more. This guy, this boomer retard Mike Hunt in chat. Can't handle logic. Maybe you should ease off the bottle there a little bit, Mike Hunt. I think you've had enough to drink for tonight. David Cooper says he's telling Mike he got hoaxed. Oh. Sorry about that, guys. I'm using a different charger cord here, but who said this isn't human? Who said that? I am very much so a human. Who said that? I just lost it. Oh, teal. Okay, teal isn't human, says Funk. Yeah, I know about the reptile thing, dude, but come on. At some point, the conspiracy theory rabbit hole has to end. I don't believe in reptile people, but I know the whole saurian teal thing. I don't buy into that. Mike Hunt says all the Gulf nations are standing in unison with the U.S. to get rid of the Islamic Republic, the IRA, and terrorist government that killed 40,000 of its own citizens, and this stupid fat fuck the Democrats support, just like this support. Hey Mike, I'm a reactionary, which means that I am as far right as possible, ethically speaking. I'm as far right as it gets. I don't hate Trump because he's a Republican. I hate him because he's not Republican enough. I know that's something you can't understand because your balls are all shriveled up in your old age and you don't remember what it feels like to have testosterone coursing through your veins. And sadly for you, I'm not sponsored by testosterone replacement therapy brands right now, so I can't even recommend you a link, but you sound like you need it. You sound like a little crybaby booze hag bitch. But I just want to clear that up with you, Mike. I am a super conservative. I'm so conservative that you would hate me for being too conservative because you're a pussy. That's first and foremost, Mike. Now, secondly, the Gulf nations that are standing in unison with the U.S. to get rid of the IRA. Yeah, where's that at? Where's that at? Because I don't see a massive war unfolding with the Gulf nations supporting us. What I do see are the Gulf nations really hoping that we pull through. And if you trust the Gulf nations, you're an idiot. None of the Gulf nations should be trusted. That goes for Iran, of course. That goes for the Saudis and the Emiratis, the people of Qatar, the Qataris, I guess you'd call them. They are easily moved and influenced by one thing: money. So you should never trust them. And backdoor deals with Iran are almost certainly being made by some of them right now at this time to spare them from Iranian scorched earth spite. So tell me you don't know geopolitics without telling me you don't know geopolitics. That would be the way to do it. Say something like Mike Hunt. Is there anything else worth reading in chat? Man, it's real bad tonight. The quality is low. So am I a constitutionalist? No, actually I'm not. The Constitution is not fitting anymore for such times because we're no longer a Christian nation. So I would like to be a constitutionalist, but even then, it's been amended too much. We should really, repeal the 19th Amendment. I don't want to really see women voting anymore. I think they're too stupid to vote and way too emotional. So we should repeal the 19th Amendment. Then maybe I'd be a constitutionalist. But then there's the 14th Amendment, and that's very pesky as well. And the Supreme Court, unfortunately, seems to side with that. So, as long as brown people can come here pregnant and dump a bunch of bullshit ass children on our soil and claim them as U.S. citizens for life, then no, I'm not a constitutionalist actually. And as long as women can continue to vote, then no, I'm not a constitutionalist actually. And really, it goes beyond women. As long as retards can continue to vote, I am not a constitutionalist. I actually believe, in many cases, you wind up taking an IQ test in high school. I know I was served with one in 10th grade, I guess, and most people are. And in many cases, that should really determine your ability to vote in the future. And sure, I would be willing to allow people the opportunity to retake it after high school, in college, or even after that. If they want to vote, they're 30 years old or something, and like, oh, you scored low on your IQ test and you're not allowed to vote. I'd be okay with them retaking it a couple of times to see if they can get a good score. But overall, I am of the belief that nobody should be allowed to vote who doesn't score at least a 90 IQ. 90 IQ minimum to vote. No women voting, too emotional. And then and even women with high IQs. There are smart women. I'm not saying otherwise, but the idea of a woman voting is just disgusting to me because they don't have to they don't have to sign up for a draft. They can vote for war. And in addition to that, women will always vote based off of social issues. So they'll vote for abortion and they'll vote for all kinds of bullshit like sodomy. And these are curses to any nation. So women shouldn't be allowed to vote, and most men also should not be allowed to vote, quite frankly. 90 IQ and up for men, and property owners, which would exclude a lot more people. But you should have a stake in America before you're allowed to vote. And that's the 19th Amendment. It does away with all that, and it says once you're 18, you can vote. I think that's stupid. I actually think that's dumb. So until those are removed, and there's plenty of others, then no, I'm not actually a constitutionalist because those are in the Constitution as amendments. You don't know how many branches of government there are. Let's see, the executive, the legislative, right? Executive, legislative, judiciary, Supreme Court, House of Representatives, the Senate, the office of president. Danny Burns. Danny Burns, you don't even know how many branches of government there are. The regressive, not progressive Democrats want to literally take the vote away from women. The regressive, what are you talking about? No Democrats runs on taking a vote away from women, you idiot. It's only the Republicans that do that. And most Republicans don't, because most men are feminist. Most men are feminist. Feminism bled into our society so profusely that it's not really a question of are you a feminist, but really it's a question of what percentage feminist are you? And for me, I'm one of the rare exceptions to this rule. I am 0% feminist. 0. Agus says there are 4 branches of government nowadays: executive, judicial, legislative, and the media. Yeah, pretty true. Danny G. Beats says based. Good mana. Based take. Thank you, Danny. I appreciate that. Subscribe for more content like this. Sounds like you found a good home here, Danny. We'd like to see you in chat just a little bit more. Repeal the 19th. It needs to be repealed. If we had repealed the 19th, if women couldn't vote, abortion would be illegal. If women couldn't vote, immigration would all be illegal. There'd be no immigration. That's the other thing I want, by the way. I want literally 0 immigration in the United States for the next 40 years. And we can't accomplish that if women vote. In order to save America truthfully, we're going to have to get to a point where all the men rise up, and we need far-right extreme men to rise up, and we need this power. And we can do that the peaceful way. I still believe that, but we need to take power back as far right extreme men, and we need to do so and act in a way when we have that power where we disregard entirely the tears of all immigrants and of all women. They should not be influencing any of our decisions. If the 19th Amendment's in place, then we will continue to have the same issues in America that we have now. And it is the fault, largely, of women. Exactly, Danny. We are too pussy-whipped. It's changing, though. Gen Z men are a lot more based. I say I'm a young millennial. I'm on the youngest end of the millennial spectrum, so I've always related more with Gen Z guys, truthfully. And with millennials, it's like the generation's like split in half. The old millennials The old millennial guys are just like the gay husband types that like worship their wives to their own dismay, as their wives just like no longer want to fuck them anymore. You gave me 2 kids. Why do we even need to have sex anymore? Besides, you're not. You've changed. You've changed. Maybe I would have sex with you if you vacuumed the carpet more often. Maybe I'd have sex with you if you did the fucking dishes. It's like some fat whale wife that's like 300 pounds, sits on the couch all day, does absolutely nothing as she works from home, and then bitches at her husband and tells him to be the maid. And then I still won't have sex with you because as you should. I'm not your mom. Fuck you. But a lot of millennials fell for that, sadly, if they're older. But I'm too young for that. I'm a younger millennial. I never fell for that shit. Women should abide by the 3 S's: sex, sandwich, and silence. Shut the fuck up. Honestly, shut the fuck up. Raise the damn kids, keep the house clean, and fucking cook. Especially nowadays. Everything that women have to do or are expected to do from a traditional standpoint is done for them by machines. We have air fryers. How the fuck do you not know how to cook in 2026? Air fryers are so easy. You literally ask Grok how long to cook your steak in an air fryer. It tells you, you do it. The air fryer does it. You walk away and come back when the timer goes off to a perfectly cooked medium rare steak. Microwave some Bob Evans fucking mashed potatoes from the dairy section and make a little bit of Kraft mac and cheese in a pot in some boiling water, bitch. It's easy. All the while, you can have the washing machine and dryer going because they do the clothes for you. You don't even need to scrub at the river anymore like the settlers did back in the 1600s. A machine does it. A machine. Oh, you gotta push the vacuum around once a week on the carpet. So hard. Oh, unbelievable. I can't believe this. I'm not your mom. No, you're not. You're supposed to be the wife. But that's just me. And these women are ridiculous. They are ridiculous nowadays. Absolutely absurd. And they'll bitch and moan about all of that. Young guys aren't falling for that anymore. I just don't see young guys falling for that. And it's turning on its head. It's getting to a point where Gen Z men, and I believe Gen Alpha will be even more savage. And kind of in weird, let's not lie, kind of in weird ways too, like, you know. But either way, like, they're gonna rise up and they're just gonna be like, no, fuck that, and they're gonna take it a path. See, I'm not a misogynist. I'm just a sexist. But a lot of these young guys are gonna become misogynists. They're gonna hate women and they're gonna want to repeal the 19th. And I'll side with them for sure on that. You cook your steak in an air fryer? Wow, you're an idiot. Hey, you're actually an idiot if you haven't figured out that air fryers literally cook steak to perfection, my guy. Literally to perfection, dude. Yeah, you are a dirty little creep. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. David Cooper says my mom was actually a real woman. Yeah, yeah. My mom too. My mom does the laundry. My dad. I'll let you guys know this right now. My dad has never done laundry, except for maybe when he was really young before he was married. But all throughout my childhood, my dad never did laundry. He maybe ironed his clothes like 5 times that I can remember. My mom irons the clothes. She does the laundry. She cooks. She does the dishes too. All of it. And it's easy. It's because my dad's out working all day. He works all day. It was like that when I was a kid. It's like that even now. He owns his own business. He works. He brings in the money. He gives her a home. It's her job to take care of it. As she should. As she should. Smokey says, end women's suffrage. We have all suffered enough. Amen. 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 I couldn't turn the damn thing on. Never have, never will. Howard. That's a good excuse. But see, now, Howard, you don't know what it's like to deal with women nowadays. Howard's our cool boomer. And I know Howard probably doesn't fully even get on board with how I talk about all of this. But, Howard, it is rough out here, man. And Howard's got cool Gen Z grandkids and millennial kids. So you probably hear enough of it from your boys anyways. But, Howard, women nowadays will literally, they'll try to force you to turn on the wash machine and do the laundry. And then when you tell them, if you tell them, I don't know how, well, because the truth is when you're, like, us young guys do know how to do it. But let's just say it's a circumstance like that where it's like, well, you never do anything around the house. You go to do something. And this is why you should always literally just say, well, that's what I have you for. Go fucking do it. Because the second you actually agree and literally, like, submit to that demand and be like, okay, you're right. Can we at least fuck later if I do the dish? Okay, yeah. You go and do the dishes. They will bitch at you for doing them wrong. Wrong. They're clean, but you somehow did it wrong. You used the wrong hand soap. Or dish soap. You used the wrong dish soap. This is why I can't trust you to do anything. And then they'll tell you, we need to go to therapy because I'm not going to sit here and endure this weaponized incompetence. It can't be me. Could never be me. Could never be me. Every girl I've ever dated knows. Don't even try it. You gotta shut that shit down immediately. Just tell her she's being a bitch. Tell her to shut the fuck up. And she can go back to doing the chores. She'll hate you for it in the moment, but if a woman's not angry with you from time to time, she doesn't really love you anyway. So, but that's what that's how they throw out that term nowadays. What do you mean you can't figure out how to turn on the wash machine? I told you to do the laundry, damn it. This is weaponized incompetence and it's gaslighting and you're a narcissist. Shut up. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying earlier, saying they even have a dishwasher and they're still complaining. The machines do it for them. Literally, it's all done for them. You just have to load them. You just put them in for like 10 seconds and turn a machine on. And they will still find a way to come up the stairs and sigh and moan and bitch while you're trying to do anything. Like relax. And they'll, it would be nice if you for once could. I'm just, no shot. Not doing it. I'm not playing those games. I do so much in my personal life. I own my own businesses. I do this. I have a lot going on. I work a job on top of it. There is just absolutely no way that I'm tolerating that. No shot. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. That's more than enough of a rant. Appreciate all you guys for being here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens. And, of course, subscribe for more content. Not typically like that rant just now. That's not usually what's talked about here. Although, at some point in time, I probably should talk about the social issue that is modern-day marriage, because it actually is a massive problem. But maybe on a different day. If you enjoyed my Iran war analysis, particularly, be sure to subscribe for more content like that. I go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and oftentimes Saturdays too. But I do try to take at least one day off a week, so be warned. And subscribe with notifications turned on so you're notified every single time I go live. And other than that, appreciate all you guys for being here. Thanks to my super chatters. Thank you for the money. Appreciate that. Howard Clegg, of course. As well as, who's the other one? Michael Cox, 6654. Thank you as well for the super chats. Thank you for the gifts as well, the jewels. And and thanks to all my members too. Glory to America. God bless the USA, the best country on earth by far, and it's not even close. Not even during a time like this is America still not the best nation on earth. It's not even close. Wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So glory to America, God bless the USA, and may God bless all of you as well. Have a great rest of your evening. I'll be back here live tomorrow. Take care.